I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands we're meeting on. Here, that's the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past and present, and any elders who may be with us today. There are two significant days in May for our First Nations peoples. May 26 is National Sorry Day, so that's an opportunity to pay tribute to the members of the stolen generations. It's also the day when the Uluru Statement of the Heart was delivered in 2017. And May 27 is the anniversary of the 1967 referendum, and that's the first time that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people were recognised as a part of the Australian population, which is pretty late when you think about it.
Yeah.
If you want to learn more about our First Nations, one way is through the Word Up podcast on ABC Radio National. They're less than 5 minutes each, and they explain the meanings of words from different First Nations languages around Australia, along with a few other things. I'll be sharing a link to that after the meetup. Okay, moving on. First, I am going to start with a bit of background. The journey that led me to be involved in the research project. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about the technique and the methodology, how we did the work. Short version, this was done during peak COVID, so there were a lot of Zoom interviews. Next up, we're going to talk about the findings of the report, and this piece is going to be drawing heavily on a presentation that two of my colleagues, Ashay and Deanna, did for Agile India. Then we'll talk a bit about what I've seen happening since we released the report, the good, the bad, and also what came out of the pandemic. And finally, what you can do and what we can all do to embed inclusive practices into our work at a variety of different levels, from the personal through to the enterprise. We're also going to take some time as we go to have a bit of a chat. So I look forward to hearing what brought people here today, what you think of what we found, and what we can all do now. So, what brought me here? I'm going to start with the simplest explanation, because when people ask me where I'm from, I usually have to ask them how much time they have. The short version. My mother grew up in Carlton after being born in Lebanon to Polish Jewish parents. My father is French Canadian, and I was born in Israel. I spent my early years in Canada before my parents split up. My mum and I then lived in America for a brief period before we came back here. So, makes me a first-generation Australian and a zero-generation Australian, a child of migrants and refugees, and a colonial settler in a lot of ways as well.
Do you feel an expat or a migrant?
I feel like I am a citizen of the world.
Nicely put. Nicely put.
That's been my Twitter line for many years, because I can't work out where to put myself.
But you're certain which planet?
Yeah, that's about as specific as it can get. I also went to an Orthodox Jewish school. So I have a minority background, and I've spent my life working in IT, where as a woman I've also been in a minority. So, you could say my exposure to the multifaceted nature of diversity started very early and has persisted throughout my life. And what did I do as a result? Well, it led me to a fair bit of volunteering. On the one hand, with an organisation called PIC ICT for Women, helping run their mentorship program, and on the other, with the Business Agility Institute, starting with research into the topic of agile in unionised environments. And then, in late 2019, I saw a meetup posing the question of whether agile practices worked against inclusion, which was hosted by our lovely Mel here. I must admit, I went in with some assumptions based on my experience of being a woman in tech, And I quickly got schooled when Mark Green and 2 other speakers related their experiences of being shut out of work by really, really simple stuff, like as a person with a visual disability, not being able to read the cards on a Kanban board. Yeah. Now, I might have been intellectually aware of that whole range of issues around different abilities, but that really opened my eyes in a very visceral way to those kinds of experiences. And it was the first time that I'd really heard about that kind of blatant discrimination. And I remember leaving that meetup in a white-hot rage. It was just so unfair and just so unproductive. Yeah. So Evan Leibon from BAI was also at that meetup, and he got in touch with Mark after that meetup. And in March 2020, Mark put out a call for volunteers, and I jumped on board straight away. So the group started out with 2 hypotheses. First, despite the positive intent, mindset, and values of Agile organisations are at risk of further excluding marginalised staff and customers. And second, organisations who embed diversity, equity, and inclusion directly into their Agile transformations outperform the ones that don't. And from there, what does a version of Agile look like that puts diversity, equity, and inclusion at its heart? So our plan was design the approach, collect and collate the data, compile the report, and then release our findings. In doing the first part, we took a very broad view of diversity. So that's including gender, race, cultural background, sexuality, age, mental health, disability, personality types, life experiences, parents, carers, so forth. And at this point, we also worked very hard to secure privacy and anonymity because we really wanted people to feel comfortable to share their experiences without feeling like they were going to suffer from it. Then, in keeping with the theme, we decided we also needed several different data collection approaches. So we conducted a literature review, we surveyed some participants, and we interviewed others. Now, you might have noticed on the previous slide, the point on Mark's slide, that inclusion creates diversity, not the other way round. And with that in mind, we were very careful to focus our interviews on the inclusion and equity part of the equation. Now, with a global team, that means we contacted organisations of all sizes and in a wide range of industries, and also looked to include people who weren't actually in paid employment so that we could hear from people who might have been excluded altogether. Now, as I mentioned, we had a team who were working day and night around the globe, thanks to time zone differences. There were a lot of late nights, early mornings, and like I said, lots of Zoom calls. Online collaboration was really just starting to come into play at that point. So at least that really, really fast, everybody's working from home now thing kind of worked in our favour. We had multiple groups, one focused on engaging with the participants and another on data crunching. And also special thanks to Chris Ruse, who was the editor of the paper, who really brought it together and made it look really schmick at the end. And then the release. Now, like I said, this presentation draws heavily from the one that Deanna and Ashay did for Agile India. And in my references, there's going to be a link to the video of that presentation. But even though the research group was largely headquartered in Melbourne, and most of the people who were involved in the research were in Melbourne, this is the first time that this research is being presented in Melbourne. My partner in crime who helped me with this presentation put this lovely sentence in here: it took that long to produce this presentation. That's not true. But yeah, it is kind of interesting that we never actually got to present this here.
It's taken that long to bring it here.
Yeah, I there's been a long period where it just kind of didn't get talked about, I think. And before I go any further, one sort of meta point that I'd like to bring up. To actually learn about all of the dimensions of diversity was an education for both our research team and also the people that we spoke to. Often people had only thought about diversity from the point of view of their own experience, or another sort of like accidentally narrow view of diversity. So it was very much an education for all of us to understand all of those various dimensions. And I should mention again, this was happening at the height of the pandemic. We had a very high turnover of volunteers. So I really need to give a shout out to Mark and Evan, who managed to keep this all going for the year that it took to get through the process. Okay, before we go too much further, some broad definitions just to make sure that we're on the same page. First one, I'm kind of going to assume, given where we are, most of you are at least familiar with the concept of business agility, which is the set of organisational capabilities, behaviours and ways of working that afford a business the freedom, flexibility and resilience to achieve its purpose, no matter what the future brings. For me, one of the really interesting things about this project was that it combined Agile and DEI practitioners. And so given that there were those two very different groups involved, it was important to ensure that everyone understood enough about the subject that might not have been their primary area of expertise. And that also applied when we were sharing the results, which is why we do this and bring both of the definitions together. And that brings me to the next one, which is diversity, equity and inclusion. All efforts made by organisations to ensure that they're creating and maintaining an environment that is welcoming and supportive for all people. Now, the emphasis for me in that is on the supportive and welcoming environment, because if you truly do that, then you're building a space where not only does everybody have a seat at the table, but they also have a sense of actually being included and not excluded by the choice of the food on the table as well. So that brings us to some more specific terms. Now, these are the things that we needed to define for our research group. Diversity, the mix of all people and the differences among us. Equality is applying the same resources and support structures to everyone. Equity is all people having equal access to opportunities and fair treatment. And inclusion is the act of welcoming all people. This is something that we found wasn't really well understood, and particularly because equity can feel unfair because people aren't getting the same things. So while giving everyone access to the same resources might feel equal, when people come from different backgrounds and with different abilities, the assumption that everyone can benefit from the same support, it doesn't really hold up. Equity is the enabler for inclusion and diversity because ensuring people have the same access to opportunities is the real way to inclusion. It's about seeing the whole picture. Okay, so at this stage, I'm keen to hear what people think about what we've seen so far. And particularly what brought people here today. Was that a hands up or?
Equity is not obvious. Like I really never thought of it that way until someone stopped and explained it. Pretty similar to what you just did there. Like I think the graphic is really nice representation.
Yeah.
I think we feel equality, but then like people need different support. So yeah. And I was surprised how not obvious that was.
Yeah, it was definitely something that we weren't necessarily expecting out of the just the initial conversations in the research group.
I think you said something very interesting. Two things. You said inclusion drives diversity. And I've seen many diverse teams that were not necessarily diverse. So nobody was bringing anything to the table.
Yeah.
Everybody was sitting at the table, which is a really interesting perspective. And then you said equity is what drives all that.
it's a very popular picture because it just like, it's, you know, when a picture tells 1,000 words, that particular picture really does tell 1,000 words.
This one we should
You know,
post.
I can go back. Yes.
You don't have to recycle.
No, it's okay. I just need to wait for the build.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Quick. Too slow.
Does everybody have it? Okay.
There's also this very common thing in diversity that looks at the visible rather than the invisible. And one of the key things for me in diversity is diversity of thinking style. And it's about allowing the proper dialogue rather than talking past each other.
It's about understanding that people have those different styles and how to make space for them. Yeah. One of the things I think later on in the talk, I'll talk about, you know, people who haven't necessarily been treated very, very well, and, you know, the people that I've spoken to who have been discriminated against because of their cognitive diversity. In my view, it's often because as a manager, the manager needs to change something about the way they're behaving, and they don't want to do that.
What I feel, if all incorporate this or all these things, one quality in this, that is empathy.
Yes.
And curiosity.
Yeah. Totally. Okay. Cool. I'm just going to let that go, and we might move on. So, moving on to the nitty-gritty. We had 425 contributors across 26 countries. Almost half were considered advanced in their understanding of business agility. Around 20% were differently abled and 7% queer and associated. As I mentioned here, we also spoke to people who were not employed in agile organisations to capture the experiences of those who may not even have been given the opportunity to contribute. And I should point out, it's not necessarily that agile organisations are more diverse, because you look at this and you kind of go, wow, that's impressive. It's probably also likely that people from minority and marginalised groups were more motivated to participate in the research. It's kind of a self-selecting thing. And another shout out at this point, the work to surface this information is thanks in large part to an organisation called Cultural Infusion, who provided their Diversity Atlas tool to help us capture the cultural and demographic diversity of our research participants quickly and easily. Now, I also have detailed stats here for things like the gender breakdown and the country breakdown, but kind of assuming that you're not that interested in all of that. But if you are, speak up now and I can go through those, but otherwise we'll just move on to the results. Let's move on to the results. Okay, so the research found some serious issues. 17% of our participants said that they had seen instances of exclusionary behaviour in agile organisations. 26% said they felt agile practices could actively create exclusion. Only 19% of agile transformations were consciously designed with equity and inclusion in mind, and even more disappointingly, that drops to 11% when you're talking about product and service design practices. Yeah, it's pretty bad. So, agile ways of working, not consciously designed to create, encourage, or support agile, diverse and inclusive teams. And DEI, generally not considered a core aspect of agile ways of working or agile transformations. And many agile processes and rituals are built to suit the majority, which can be quite exclusionary. The way I see it, these are all issues with what I call default thinking. It's the idea that what works for the majority, it's not just normal, it's right. In fact, it's so right it doesn't even need to be considered. And anything that deviates from that is not just different, but it's wrong. Now, sometimes that's because people aren't aware, and we found many people don't understand DEI or how it can be used to improve business outcomes. The most common response we heard when discussing the intersection between Agile and DEI was, I haven't thought about it. And that has consequences. We heard many instances of bias and microaggressions inside Agile organisations. We'll come back to some of those in a sec. It doesn't just have consequences for individuals. Organisations are missing out by not considering DEI in their Agile practices, because diverse and inclusive teams can create products that appeal to a wide range of customers. By not acting to centre DEI, businesses are actually missing out on real business opportunities.
Can I have a question?
Yeah.
Because we're in the business agility community here, right? We're talking about agile organizations. Do we have any data points about like normal organizations, not agile organizations? Do you have like no insight between the two?
Not from our research, because the research was done, because it was done through the Business Agility Institute, it was done with organisations that are already considered to be agile in some way. There is plenty of other research out there, and one of the things I will be providing in the links and talking about a little bit later is some of the stuff that's happening outside of Agile, like the post-report stuff is not always focused so much on Agile, but this all was within organisations that consider themselves to be in the agility camp. Yeah.
Do you have an example of how agile stuff go against the city?
Well, I'm glad you asked. Here. Starting with some of the not so fabulous experiences that people had. So I've included some of the experiences that we had reported to us on screen. I'll mention another common one, which is that people reported being seen as the only person or the token person of their demographic. And common agile rituals like stand-ups, they don't just work against religious diversity, as you can see up here. They also work against, something as simple as working parents when they happen during school pick-up and drop-off.
What if you can't stand?
Exactly.
I just realised how offensive that might be to some team members, and I've been telling people to do it for many years, so
Yeah.
never thought of it that way.
To be fair, I don't know the last time I actually stood at a stand-up.
No, maybe not. But yeah, well, it was probably in the same time that people with visual issues couldn't see
Absolutely.
the cards that we were
Absolutely.
talking to, so
Yep.
it
Completely.
probably offended them then as much as it does now.
I can speak for Scrum or to take care of the Kanban thing. Scrum actually changed adapted the guide many times because daily stand-up was indeed quite offensive for people who can't stand up. So now it's a daily Scrum, or other people who can fight. And they did the same with backlog grooming. Grooming is offensive in some cultures. Some
Interesting choice of words.
They change it to refinement for that
Yeah,
very reason.
exactly.
So like
And the scrum part, yeah, I kind of agree. If you don't like rugby, you know, where's the place for you?
Yeah.
Interesting. Can I stick to rugby?
Yeah.
Honestly, I've heard it.
Okay. We also saw self-selecting exclusion. So people didn't look to work in agile organisations because they perceived that the speed of work would be a barrier to them, given their circumstances. Now, that might be age. They might think they're too young or too old. They might have accessibility needs. They might not be native speakers. They might be neurodiverse. They might just be unfamiliar with agile ways of working. And you might think, well, that's just a perception, but that we actually had reported examples of being passed over for promotions, coaching, personal development opportunities, and even social events. So, yeah, not great.
It's a high bar, right? So where I'm going with this is those the times where agile events have worked, right? And I'm picturing a few successes in mind is it's because of someone who's outstanding playing that facilitative role and attuned to inclusion and keeping everyone else attuned to inclusion as well. Right?
You need at least one person.
Yes.
Yeah.
And but when I think about the individuals who were doing that, and amongst the practitioner field, they truly are exceptional people. So it's a high bar because the successes seem to be centred around exceptional people doing exceptional things.
Yeah. It shouldn't really need to be
It shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be accepted. It doesn't need to be. I think part of the issue is that it's probably the people who are exceptional because if you've got a culture that doesn't lend itself to that, you need to be exceptional to speak up against that. Yeah, it's not that you need to be exceptional. It's just the exceptional people are the ones who are going to go against the flow and the grain and the, you know. Yeah.
You fear of punishment if you're
Yeah, absolutely.
That's punitive. Yeah.
And valid as we saw. So on the organisational front, again, I've included some examples here. Woke washing, it's a thing. One of my favourite examples calling that out is the gender pay gap bot on Twitter that replies to organisations posting about International Women's Day with that organisation's gender pay gap. There are plenty of organisations that talk the talk but do not walk the walk. And we found instances in our research of organisations whose DEI efforts were really just about meeting corporate CSR targets. And interesting, there were clear differences when we interviewed leaders versus individuals. The leaders' views were more closely aligned with the corporate views. That wasn't always the same for the individuals. But the issue there is that walking the walk is so important for leaders in particular, because role modelling inclusive behaviour is one of the things that as a leader you absolutely must do if you are actually serious about DEI. Going back to the point about the workplace environment, a perfect example of tools and processes being designed for the majority, open plan offices generally don't work well for many people, but particularly bad for the neurodiverse, which is why working from home is so popular with that cohort. Unfortunately, with the big push to the return to the office, we're probably seeing a bit of that regressing at the moment. It's not all bad. So we did see examples of organisations intentionally designing for inclusion and equity, not just for employees, but also for customers. In addition to what you can see on screen, we saw examples of people building and designing workshops to be quiet at times and to allow people that may not have the strongest voice or be comfortable to speak up at those points in times to be able to participate. We also, just going to quote from someone else, had someone who talked about working on a payroll system rather than just having a binary way of selecting gender. They added a non-binary option to make it more inclusive for everyone. And then on the organisation side, we see a lot of potential in organisation behaviour. A couple more examples in addition to what we've seen on screen. My organisation doesn't discriminate on any criteria, gender, religion, caste, etc. During my
Sorry.
we've got these really lovely, very quiet times.
Sorry.
Okay, during my training, one person changed their gender from male to female. We interviewed that person. She was brilliant with her ideas and she's doing a wonderful job on her project. Respondents also reported on the positive impacts of inclusive behaviour. Embracing diversity and inclusion is why we are so successful and why we've seen year on year Net Promoter Score improvements from customers. That's why we've been such a successful and profitable business. Now, my theory with that one is that customers with diverse needs particularly appreciate it when they see organisations that make these efforts authentically because they're so used to being overlooked. Yeah, absolutely. Like if something is great, you know, but everybody's doing it, you don't really see anything special about it. But
It lowers the grade bar.
really does.
Accepted.
Kano's theory, right? Yeah.
Credibility through integrity. If they see you being in yes,
Demonstrating integrity.
Gives you great credibility.
It's like when, as an organisation, if you do right by your customer, they will be happy about it. If you do something bad and you recover from it, they're even more happy
Yes.
with you, right? So, like extending that example, if they see that all of these other organisations out there are treating them so terribly and you don't, they will love you. You don't even need to treat them that well. You just need to not ignore them.
That's it down.
I know. It sounds terrible to say it that way, but, you know, unfortunately, particularly for some people with diverse needs, the bar is incredibly low.
There's something in there about gratitude and mindset and everything that comes later.
Okay. So I'm curious. I mean, we've already started the conversation, but just wondering whether that set of experiences triggered anything for anyone. Maybe that's not the right word to use. Generated any thoughts about your own experiences and where that might have resonated for you?
I always think of a dinner when I first moved to Australia and went to a dinner in IT sales, and I think there were 60 people there, and I was the only female in IT sales. There was one other woman that showed up who was in marketing or admin or something, right? But other than that, it was just, you know, it was really like, wow. This was 10 years ago. So
It's really not that long ago.
And there's just certain industries that have that, right?
Yeah.
Like it's just very, but it's also that there's not the diversity outside the workplace either, right? There's not that many people of diverse kind of backgrounds wanting that specific role. You tend to go to different roles, so it's also hard to find diversity.
Yeah.
Well, there's certainly a fraternity I find as well of people that hire the same people everywhere they go.
Yeah.
Like people hire themselves.
And or like literally their buddies.
Yes.
True, but when we are talking about diversity, it is so important these days in every organization, but it depends on the individual, I guess. I saw in my organization, they were very focused on diversity, inclusion, and sustainability, and I was the meeting leader of our sustainability program. But my manager used to like, her behavior is different. Her way of accepting me and the other colleague who is from this country is different. And we are working with India team and other team. Her behavior also again different for India team and China team. So you cannot force people to, you cannot inject that thing to some individual. If you want to incorporate this, that individual should change her mindset or his mindset, then I think this is relevant for discussing.
Yep. It's very difficult to change the mindset of people who aren't necessarily aware.
Yeah, in leadership, in front of leadership team, it's kind of disguised. They're like something not true.
So here's an interesting proposition. I'll throw it out there. The debate, or in cut off.
Well, I'm not going to be cutting anything off. I've just got this lovely little
the timer. It's hard to precipitate a change in mindset in someone who's succeeding.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yes. That's telling them that everything they're doing is right, right?
It's the failures that tell you that something's wrong, something's not right, something's not working. You have to adapt somehow.
What's that quote? That it's a beautiful quote. You can't change. Sorry, you can't help somebody understand the change that's needed if their
livelihood depends on them not understanding it.
Yes.
That's the one.
My part.
I haven't heard that before.
Yeah, that's really
A friend of mine offers a slightly more morbid view of the world, but she says that the only way that all of these people are going to change, or the only way that this is going to change,
one death at a time,
is when all of these people are dead.
Yes.
Unfortunately.
So dark.
It's dark, but it's also like
enough of them are dead.
I would challenge that, and the only reason I would challenge that is, unfortunately, those people. That's exactly what I was going to say. They have children, and they inculcate their children with those attitudes.
Or hopefully they do themselves out of business because
I mean, so often the people who are benefiting from the system actually don't understand how they're benefiting from the system. It's so normal that they're just not aware.
Or their contribution to maintaining the system with its structural inequities as they are.
Well, I mean, calling it structural inequity is really exposing the issue, right? It's really, really hard to change that stuff when it's baked in.
I was familiar with a company that always hired the best of the best. And their definition of the best of the best was having a very narrow set of skills.
People like that.
And yes, they wanted clones of the existing things. There was another company.
I'm hearing the lead there saying I have a very specific set of skills.
So there was another company I worked for as a hiring manager, where the process was that the recruiter would hand me a set of employees. I was finding that there was no diversity, and I was very unhappy with what they were giving me. And I was saying, well, why don't we advertise directly, and I will filter, because I wasn't happy with what I was getting from the recruiter. And I said, well, that's not our process. That's not how we do this.
And the recruiter's pre-filtering based on best chance of a sale.
Yeah.
So recruitment is absolutely one of my sort of like buzz trigger points. Because
Finger button.
Definitely, because people take a job spec and hoist it into an ad, and it's like, no, that's not what an ad is about. Recruitment is so much about skills, aptitude, attitude.
Do you think
And
by
it needs
doing
to be
that
turned around.
Attitude,
Aptitude, skills.
Yeah. Do you think by doing that they create a message that's necessarily exclusionary? So people self-exclude before even applying.
So,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
so that
Especially those
yeah.
that are.
Yes, that huge list of skills, men will look at it and go, I could do that. Women will look at it and go, I don't meet 100%, so I won't apply.
Got 99.
Yeah.
Actually, guys, I got one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have
That's
that.
exactly the way it
And
works.
people go, oh, that's a problem with women. No, it's not, because once they get past and get to the actual face-to-face interviews, men are interviewed according to their potential. Women are interviewed according to what they've already done.
Interesting.
So women understand this and therefore will not apply, because if they don't already meet 100%, they will not be considered.
And I will put my hand up as someone who has absolutely 100% experienced that.
Well, I just
So it's a vicious
recently,
circle.
I have a question on that regard. Is
Some
that
point in their life face that definitely.
Yeah.
Everywhere,
It's
yeah.
part of our reality.
Yes.
But I think the first problem is us. We do have to apply. I started applying to jobs that I cannot, that I have like 40% of the things, and I've gotten them. So it is like there's a second problem, that's the next layer, but the first layer is for us to fix.
Well, what we can control.
It's the only thing we can control, right? So
But
we
I
must
mean,
keep applying,
yeah,
even
yes.
though we may be rejected a lot more than them.
But it's a much higher bar.
It is.
Yeah.
I agree. Absolutely.
You had a question.
I did, and it was more on like your experience. Did that experience strike you as representative of most of your experiences, or was it more of an outlier for you?
No, that was more of a. So, Mel and I have had this discussion before, and it's also the thing about being the generalist.
Yes.
I class myself as a generalist. I have a broad range of skills. I've had lots of operations roles. I've had lots of project roles. I'm comfortable in both spaces. But because I'm not that easy to put in a box, it's really, really hard. Yeah. So I'll go in saying, I have managed projects that are very, very similar to the one that you're looking for management of.
Oh, no, exactly this
But
one.
because I haven't done exactly that thing,
In a place exactly like mine.
Yes.
But you're the only organisation in the world that is exactly like yours.
Yes.
And this is the first time you're doing that
Yes.
project exactly like that. So,
Yes.
you know, what do you want?
the exact same tools. Right? When you use that tool before, no.
yeah, that's it.
Sorry.
That really, like, that
Nothing
particular
has
thing
changed,
annoys me so much, because it's like, look at how many things I have experience with. Do you not, like, can you not see that I don't have an issue with picking up new tools?
True.
But that's not a thing.
Just a tool, but they're so biased. Like.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Okay. No.
Yes.
Do you want to quickly grab?
Oh, do you want to do the pizza now? Yeah, before it gets cold.
I know what I'm thinking. There's some plates. There's some pizzas. The one far right has meat inside it. The rest don't.
So the meat eaters are on the far right.
That's not
Yes.
very conceptual.
I put the vegetables on the left. The cheese in the middle. Oh God. Cannot win. Cannot win.
You did it perfectly.
And that was.
I've had the pleasure of working for someone that I think is part of that ICTW, whatever.
Oh, Vic, I say too for women.
Yeah, Lee Gibson. I don't know if you know her. She's from Telstra now.
No, well, but there's also VIC for Women runs like 5 or 6 different programs.
Okay, yeah.
So mentoring is one, but they also do something for their big program is called Go Girl, and it's
Girl for IT,
yeah.
Is there any exec focused one at all? Like,
So there's the importance of women, which is like a networking, get a speaker, and that kind of thing. And they also do what's hot in IT.
Yeah,
Which is
I know all the names.
a panel of people and a particular topic, and it's a really interesting format because the speakers then go and sit with each of the tables of people, and you have deep dive conversations with particular speakers as well as having the general chat with everyone.
Yeah, okay, interesting.
And they also have something for girls in uni. Grad girl.
Yeah, okay, interesting. Another friend of mine is an ex-ANZer as well, Jeanette, who runs HEX. I don't know if you've heard of HEX. People don't. They do a lot of stuff at uni, HEX. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, a lot of that sort of uni stuff, and
Waking up.
teaching them real stuff, like startup stuff. This is on campus. And,
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, it's really.
That's awesome.
So yeah.
So I get to enjoy twice. Somewhere between. It's okay to have no filter as long as you have good comedic timing.
Yes.
But if your timing's off, filters real. Filters. Yeah.
Timing is everything.
So I discovered very late in life, in fact, last November, that I've been neurodivergent my whole life. Quite a lot.
It's your diversity.
So
It seems to be something that
it's amazing.
a lot of people are.
Think really clearly. Not just you have fleeting moments of it, but have
deliberately studying it, which was like going down the beaten path.
as opposed to constantly having to go away from
It's very handy.
go away from the challenge, force you to back in, go away from the challenge, force you to go, have a good moment, get exhausted, and then find a way to go back and recharge, etc. Constant cycle of
It becomes
taking
really
trouble.
It's either flow or fluff.
like a course on how to remember
It's
things.
either like, this is interesting.
And so kind of focus on let's learn.
I'm all there.
Why are you interrupting my hyperfocus?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
kind of got to a point where we could have so many
And the stuff that you don't
you know,
want to,
proper conversations.
make feel
things better.
like
Like,
me.
there's, for example, there's a phrase in
It's a
like
test.
with an example. So there's
The pressure
one
of the
thing
test,
that I
not-
like a lot. That's
No. But
It's
it's a physical reaction.
physical reaction.
good. No problem.
Imagine if you eat something that doesn't agree with you.
And then wait, yeah.
Stuff in your brain said, I don't want to take part
So
in
I
this.
love that phrase and
That's-
how I remember it.
And
They
I thought,
because everyone says no and
I thought
it's
everyone
wrong,
did.
right?
This is the thing. And I think I'm in a similar situation. I mean, I've never been diagnosed, but according to my cousin, I'm apparently neurodiverse. And
there was a
So I only self-diagnosed,
It's like they have massive impact. They have
a
that.
handful of years.
this was this was an accidental discovery on the basis of a side effect of a different medication to achieve a different purpose.
Yeah.
Was giving me focus. And my doctor said it doesn't do that for you unless
you have. Yeah. Okay.
So hence we started the whole diagnosis test process. It took like 12 months. And so it wasn't me coming up with the idea. It was
No.
an observed
Something completely different.
categorical side effect.
Yeah.
So yes, I learned and it explained it. Explained. Oh my God! Explained a lot. Explained a hell of a lot. So yes.
And when you have that revelation, it's like, wow, like all of a sudden everything becomes clear, and that's great. And on the other hand, it's like, why haven't I known this all my life?
Yeah, but there's the other side. The other side of it is the way that I discovered it gives me confidence that it's true and that's my information bias.
Yeah.
Right? Because it was discovered through a means that I didn't self-identify and I didn't know.
It's not like really 100,
Yeah.
right?
It was, oh, this is classically symptomatic of.
It's what you were talking about before with, you know, things that are invisible.
Yes.
You can't
So-
see it.
I did a fencing course.
Which type of fencing? Face. Okay.
Just, and I have trouble left and right. My husband has learnt to watch my hands if I'm navigating, because I'll say, go left.
All of the hands, yeah.
Yeah.
So she worked in schools or something or other, and
No, my other left.
and she said, okay, do you have this, do you have that, whatever. Now, I live with dyslexia. I don't have problems with reading or writing. The only things I have problems with are letters with tails, P's and Q's and B's and D's. Left and right, for me, numbers.
I think you know.
Numbers make no sense.
I have a question. How would you design the? I'll say this with carefully. In a little system that was inclusive.
Okay, that makes sense.
Is that numbers? I mean, they're all from basically from India.
Asian number systems.
Sorry.
Asian number systems. They're much easier.
Abacus. So this, I understand. Because it's visible. I can understand. Time, I don't understand.
So in an Asian number system, instead of having 26, you have 2, 10, 6. And that's much easier to understand
Well,
than having a specific number name for 20.
Traveling again. Yeah.
but it is based on the abacus.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's that
I've
physical,
been to like my family's
visual
so like
representation in.
so we traveled fine. But like
There's another person here. There's actually a counting grid when you're doing that. But yeah, it translates kind of.
I just give up. I don't do the numbers in my head. That's what this is for. I just can't do it.
No.
Shortcut, right?
Yeah.
Right? Like just modern.
So for a long time I wouldn't do Sudoku.
I don't do Sudoku.
Once you realise that the numbers aren't numbers,
They're symbols. They're just symbols.
they're just simply,
clothed with words.
it's okay, it's just logic.
Yeah, okay.
Like
So it's not to do with numbers, and therefore they're not numbers.
I was working
And then you can do them.
product.
Okay.
For me, just the easy one, like the hard ones.
people.
Yeah.
See, I used to do 4x4 Sudoku until I got bored because it was just too easy.
So yeah, spoken that when I was at school, spoken maths was just so hard for me.
Yeah.
Numbers are visual to me.
Everything.
They're not sounds, they're visual.
But
So I can't cope with people reciting numbers.
yeah, it's on fire.
Numbers are something that I read.
Stop. Why everybody's
So there's so many things that we don't
loads of
necessarily
time.
know. Like I know somebody who is aphasic,
You know, big breaks for chunks, right?
aphantasic, sorry.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah.
So no pictures in their head
So I
whatsoever.
get the
So
concept.
they don't see, they don't dream in pictures, they don't see pictures in their head or stuff. In the same group that I talk talk to. I know somebody who doesn't think in words.
If this isn't working, lots of stuff.
So I feel like the answer to your question is that there isn't one way. Like you need to take whatever it is and work out who you're trying to get to process it and what they need in order to be able to process it.
I'm very curious how we would feel some of the complex concepts that are done.
No, I saw that.
You guys
Yeah, I saw that.
knowledge.
In the Agile 101 world of the 17 white figures out, the 17 middle-aged white men figured this out. Sorry, 17 middle-aged
Go play around.
let's be clear.
Some of which have gone on to good things and some of which don't get it at all.
17 middle-aged upper middle class American white
Yes.
men. There you go.
Yep.
Basically, you're right. Once you start visualizing it, people connect the dots. Like,
Except if you can't visualize things.
yeah, if you're a fantasy,
I didn't really realize that.
how do you talk about how good that movie was that you just saw?
Well, maybe you're not into movies.
No, because it's narrative. And that's the
I
thing.
have to leave at 7:30.
Okay.
Get back to the don't think I'm being rude when I get up and walk out.
No, that is all fine.
It's fine.
People.
It's really good.
We appreciate you for as long as you can be with the school.
Well, I had to come and check out the office too, so yeah, I've been. I can have a seat here occasionally. So yes.
Cool. It's not a bad office.
It's a really good location.
Oh, yeah.
Good.
Where are you going to
Yeah, I've just joined as the 13 topologies person. If you don't know who I am, so
Oh, cool.
Like,
How old are they?
13.
Hello.
right there. Hello.
I
Really good age.
not did, but I've read 10 topologies. Back to front.
Good.
So, good idea.
We can't go
What have
stay.
you written?
Yes, reverse.
Not just that, poorly communicated, poorly marketed, yeah, there's a lot of problems.
Described as a reverse Conway.
Well, that fits pretty good.
So the description of it being a reverse Conway. So, drive your architecture by team structure, etc. Just curious. I was always curious going. Are you pitching it right now? Are you pitching it?
There's also more.
Is it better for better ways of doing it? Yeah.
I'm gonna do a talk soon in Melbourne, but yeah, I think there's more of a relationship with trauma.
You won't be a
Yeah, I'll be speaking in everywhere. Anyone will let me speak.
more than happy to have you.
Trauma and healing, and it's relationship to like what team technology is actually all about, because team technology has got nothing to do with teams. And like the shapes and the interaction modes is completely thrown off what the actual book's about. It's about like a lot of it's about sociotechnical interactions between humans, machines, and that, as well as
So I have this thing about the. I don't know if you've ever seen the burpee cartoon with the people in the box, the A to B and the mess outside.
Yeah.
I love that cartoon. And to me, there's two ways to read it. There's the stuff before you get into the mix, which is simplistic. There's stuff after you've dealt with the mess and you've created a model to be able to do something about it,
yes.
which is simple. And so many people stay on the simplistic side,
Yes.
and that's what they're doing with team topology.
Music is really
Get through the mess and out the other side to the simple.
Well, a good mess. Don't worry. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of extensions I think as well. There's, from what they've done, but
Language.
yeah, don't. My brain's going a bit mental at the moment. I've got to go and try and prepare for a 6:30 a.m. discovery call. It's like,
God.
Wow. Okay.
so I've got to go and meet people tonight to prepare for this call tomorrow morning. It's like, oh my god.
When you
So, well, I love working. Because I get a whole day in, and then I can do a few hours work. And I'm done. So, some people can't do it, but I like it. You work from anywhere when I want.
Yeah, let us know when you may use your phone.
Yeah, I will. I'll pop in one day and say hello. It's me for a minute as well. I've got a race.
Very good. Let's chat. Catch up.
Yeah, I'll pop in and see everyone in the office. And,
Yep.
Yeah,
You Adam, I guess just use LinkedIn and see.
we are connected now, so.
Or really, really cleverly, our email scheme is martin@teamform.co.
Hey, I'm Luke at Tim's phone. It's pretty easy. Well, that's because Matt
It's
was
great
like,
those early days, right?
Matt was sitting there going, "What do you want to be called?" And I was like, "Wow, hang on." And he's like, "Nah, too late. It's done." So yeah, that's me. All right, we'll be around. See you all soon.
Excellent adventure. Luke. Thank you for us.
Yeah. My brother is an advocate for people on the spectrum. He calls it Asperger's, but I point out that Asperger was actually a Nazi who used the diagnosis to decide who was going to the gas chambers. But he seems to think this is Asperger's is a superpower. So I say, well,
It can lead to it can lead to extraordinary results.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure that superpower is the way I put it.
Yeah, I'm on the spectrum myself, and it's made my life It's made my life very difficult, and I spent 30 years adapting. So it was very difficult 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Now I've mostly mitigated the problems.
I think people are more aware,
Yeah.
which helps. Doesn't
But it's very lumpy. It depends on where you are, right?
It's because I've got a whole. I've realised the other day, a whole personality built around, entirely constructed of the masking of all of the traits that make the bullied kid that's going out. Right? And so everything else around is it's 100% mask. But it's fun being the mask. So yeah, is it real? I realised it wasn't, but it's fun.
It's good. It's got its own reality,
So I
though.
enjoy it.
So one of the reasons I became punk was because it was such an obvious mask. It was so out there. It actually created distance between me and the mask.
Right.
So I could be really safe behind the mask.
Right. Wow.
Because it was such an out there mask.
Right. You were talking about.
Well, so if I had something to say to my younger self when I was having a lot of difficulty, is that you have more. I wouldn't say that being on the spectrum is superpower, but definitely your strengths have value. Your weaknesses hold you back, but you have the strengths give you value and are valuable. So even if the other side, social skills, are giving a whole lot of grief. So yeah, I spent about 30 years building up my social skills. And I don't think it's a mask. I mean, I went to someone who could not deliver a presentation, to someone who delivered a presentation, then collapsed afterwards,
Yep.
to someone who's quite comfortable giving a presentation.
And it's about figuring out what the model is that helps you do that.
Yeah.
Because your model is going to be different to other people's models.
Yeah.
For me, the model was a raging introvert. The model for me was MBTI, so Myers-Briggs, was being able to understand the cognitive function stack.
The umbrella people are right.
To be able to go, you're using these words, therefore you're probably in one of these boxes. Now I can actually start to understand how you're communicating and how you might be thinking, so that I can understand my communication style needs to resonate with you.
Yeah.
Well, communication style sounds more like discipline. Myers-Briggs. But anyway, sort of the only personality type in scientific supported is social, or the big five. But I can still tell you that I'm INTP, basically mostly N. Sort of like I'm way out on N and sort of in the middle of sort of everything else.
It changes over time too.
Yes.
The fundamental science of MBTI has been debunked.
Yeah. Well, so
It was good. It's good in the absence of a frame of understanding. It's good to have a frame of understanding.
it's a model. All models are wrong. Some of them are useful, right?
Yeah.
So using
You know who said that, right?
Huh?
George Box. He was a famous statistician, university statistician in the 1970s.
So using
before I was born.
MBTI to do recruitment
Anyway, how do I?
is totally wrong.
Sorry.
Totally.
Using MBTI to do recruitment
Oh
is
God.
totally wrong.
Oh God. No.
People do that.
Yeah.
It's stupid.
Yeah.
People do.
It is a model. Is it useful?
I found it useful. I mean, I found it incredibly useful when I was younger, because it told me that I wasn't wrong.
Yes.
Yeah, because I grew up in a home where my parents were always like, "Why aren't you going out? Why don't you have more friends? Why aren't you out there?" And I thought that there was something wrong with me. And hey, it just turns out I'm introverted.
Why aren't you a nurturing woman?
Well, that's because I'm also an NTJ. I got all of them.
It is a very useful model when you get past the astrology phase.
Yeah. And this is the thing, it's like models, you need to understand that it doesn't give you everything, it doesn't explain everything, and you really shouldn't be using it as a way of not managing people.
It's not a horoscope.
People don't understand it.
Shall we resume?
Sure.
Yeah. Because I still want to hear the rest.
There's a rest.
I'm like halfway through.
Shit is
Not really halfway through, but yeah.
No. Take your breath. One more
The
slide.
pizzas came a little bit early.
Yeah.
And listen with back.
Yeah.
Original.
I know you.
Here's one I prepared earlier.
What's the name of the one? Diddles what?
Mel's kryptonite.
Why not?
No.
Who wants it?
Okay, so after the report, now I'm going to preface this by saying this part is entirely personal reflection. There's been some input from the original research group, but essentially we're now out of the space that is informed by any kind of formal research. Let's start with the heavy stuff. So, COVID. We did conduct our research in 2020, but the effects of COVID hadn't really played out at that point. So one of the big things to address is what was the result of it and what's happened since the pandemic measures ended. The results of enforced remote working were mixed. So harking back to Mark's talk, his kill the post-it hashtag, well, the post-its really did go away, but on the other hand, a lot of the technology that replaced it isn't really designed with accessibility in mind, and so sometimes the alternatives aren't actually any better. What made it work both then and now is the same thing. It's teams being intentional and flexible in their ways of working, focused on the individuals and the interactions, and on ensuring that people can be productive rather than the processes and the tools. Who would have thought? Outside of the Agile community, obviously COVID had a massive negative impact on people living in lower socioeconomic areas and people working in face-to-face roles. But women were negatively impacted even in Agile organisations doing remote work. There was a recent study into the impact on women in accounting from the need to manage housework while working from home. And there's also been a more recent board diversity index that shows that we've stalled on improving diverse cultural, gender and disability representation on boards. I'll include links to those in my pack. And then, of course, post-COVID, we've seen what I mentioned before, the push to return to the office. And while it might be acknowledged that 5 days a week isn't a thing, we really have seen a lot of organisations regress in their flexibility, and that obviously has a direct result on inclusion and diversity. Next up, polarisation. It's important to acknowledge that DEI is controversial, and it's become more so. Now, I'm assuming to an extent I'm preaching to the choir because you wouldn't be here if this wasn't something that you felt something positive about, but there's been a definite backlash against efforts to intentionally increase diversity, and that comes from sometimes a place of valid concern. So one of the things that we found in the project was that the frictionless nature of a well-running team is often more prevalent in less diverse teams. Doesn't necessarily lead to a better business outcome, but it's easier to work in that environment sometimes. One other thing we found in our research is that these things aren't easy to measure, which also doesn't help with the controversy. That said, teams with greater cognitive diversity have been shown time and again to have better performance. But the backlash is real, and it's having real results globally. Key example being the Voice to Parliament results here, and also the spate of recent decisions by the Supreme Court in the US. And progress is slow even without the backlash. With the recent gender pay gap report that was recently released in Australia at over 20%. And that brings us to the third point, DEI fatigue. It can mean two things. It's fatigue in organisations seeking to implement inclusive practices and fatigue in people championing DEI programs. All of it takes its toll. It's widely acknowledged that DEI work is especially difficult to deal with psychologically. I've included some links to that in my pack. But essentially what that means is people tend to drop out of the fight. And we saw that during the report, and we've seen it afterwards. It's even harder if you identify with the groups whose interests you're championing, because then the microaggressions aren't just professional, they're also personal. But it's not all bad. There was some really great stuff that came out of it. The report generated a lot of discussion at the time, and I'll include some links to work that came out of it, including some interesting stuff from ThoughtWorks, who were one of the supporting organisations. There were a couple of specific results. As you can see here, the BAI included DEI behaviours explicitly in its new domains of business agility, not just with what you see here, but also in other areas like promoting psychological safety. And as well as that, yes, we also saw the other positive outcome, the Agile Alliance's new code of conduct for agile coaching. You went away.
Welcome back.
Come back. What I like about the Agile Alliance's code of conduct. You know what?
Yes, moving.
Yeah, don't touch.
What I like about this in particular is it's not just framed from the positive side of bringing different voices in, but it also recognises that there is a duty to aim to get rid of discrimination when you can. Okay, now, so the personal reflection. The Victorian government doesn't subscribe to this model or to the BAI as far as I'm aware, but I've been employed in a number of roles in the Victorian government for the past 5 years. I'm not speaking in any official capacity. But I do see a lot happening DEI-wise. There is an explicitly articulated openness to catering to the diverse needs of employees and an understanding that the end products will have to do the same. On the one hand, I know people who have had negative experiences in the VPS with exclusionary behaviour, so that's a thing even in places that purport to be inclusive. But the Victorian government is doing good work with the Europe Justice Commission, the initiative to bring diversity to place naming, that's geographic place naming. In my own experience, people are more open to discussing their neurodiversity and the way that impacts on how they work best. And at a basic level, the legislative requirements for government mean that DEI is a priority thanks to the need to cater to everyone in the community. It's not always done right, but it should be baked in. Okay, so now let's have a little bit of a chat about what we can all do. Big picture first. We've already seen the two examples from the BAI domains and the Agile Alliance Code of Conduct. If you're part of a community and this isn't something you've seen discussed, then I would encourage you to ask what your community's inclusive practices are or what their plans are to progress in that direction. I can give you one very simple example from when I was volunteering with Mentor She. We made sure that we changed up the times of our meetings. So we had events during morning, lunchtime and after work, so that as a member you'd have an opportunity to attend something no matter what your outside obligations were. It's a really simple thing to do. At an organisation level, our research showed agile transformations that are not intentional about DEI are less effective. Individuals suffer, business outcomes are negatively impacted. So that means that building skills in DEI within your existing workforce can enable those planning and implementing agile transformations to bake inclusiveness in at its core. And at the product level, intentionally designing with inclusion in mind only really starts with questions like, do your products comply with accessibility standards? How do you plan user engagements to ensure you capture a wide variety of voices? And it's also important to build diversity into product teams so that the representation of diverse customer views is incorporated into the processes and product plans at the start rather than as an afterthought. Now, this does need to be done sensitively. Recognise that some people aren't necessarily able to contribute to certain conversations, no matter how welcoming in the environment. It might be due to personal issues, it might be a perceived lack of safety, perhaps based on previous experiences. So it's vital for organisations not to require employees to contribute to those conversations. That's yours.
Leave it or go.
It's a phone.
Oh my God.
What are you going to do about it?
I mean, yeah. Sorry, cat, yes,
Yes.
same, but I don't have it as my ringtone. My God. Oh,
I might too.
no, she's insistent enough. She bosses me around enough.
Yeah, you don't need to hear it all any more than you already do, right?
I'm so sorry.
Okay, in terms of what can be done within organisations, and this applies to everyone, but particularly to leaders, like I said before, it's critical to walk the walk. Demonstrate the kind of inclusivity in your own behaviour that you want to see from others. Now, I will note, like I said before, these slides were like heavily borrowing from the presentation that was done a few years ago, and so coaches feature quite heavily in this, even though the skills report that we covered in Meetup a few months ago highlights the change in demand for coaches. I did want to leave that term in here though, because I think it's good to make sure that people understand that it's not just about if you're in a management role and you have people reporting to you. Anybody can take a leadership role in an organisation. It's something that you do from yourself rather than from the role that you're in. So, in terms of some specific examples again, when building diverse teams, you need to consider how you source and attract candidates from diverse pools and eliminate bias in hiring procedures. So, use inclusive language in your job ads. Don't go asking for ninjas and rock stars. You will not attract diverse candidates that way. There is a job ad gender decoder that you can use to avoid that kind of language. And for interviews, consider providing questions ahead of time to candidates to give those who are less able to do that on-the-spot thinking the opportunity to have more time to answer confidently. You also need to think about how you review pay and performance and provide promotion and development opportunities. They need to be used flexibly to meet different needs. And focus on strengths, particularly in reviewing performance. There is a tool called Textio that can help you craft positive feedback. And finally, look for ways to measure the impact of your actions on the diversity of your teams and the degree to which they feel psychologically safe being authentic to themselves. Creating an inclusive culture through equity requires an intentional, adaptive, and transformational approach that changes behaviours and attitudes, as well as policies, practices, and programs. Okay. Now, those of you who know me probably guess I think this slide needs a little bit less jargon and a little bit more plain talk. Are you going to work? That's better.
Yep.
Okay. So, there are plenty of ways organisations can be more inclusive. Focusing on just one from this group, leadership, there is a strong and statistically significant correlation between the diversity of management teams and overall innovation. Companies that reported above average diversity on their management teams also reported innovation revenue that was 19 percentage points higher than that of companies with below average leadership diversity. So 45% of total revenue versus just 26%. But it's a journey. You need to expect it to take a while. HBR published an article in 2022 called The 5 Stages of DEI Maturity. Organisations are on the journey when they start off in the state of being aware. From there, they go through being compliant and then taking tactical measures before becoming integrated and then finally sustainable. So consider where your organisation is and what kinds of things you need to do just to get it to the next level. Okay, next. It's up to each and every one of us to make the difference that we want to see. And there are rewards to be reaped in doing so. At the personal level, if you haven't already read the report, I highly encourage it. It has a lot more fascinating insights and covers the topic with much more nuance than I've been able to convey here. And bringing this back to where I started, it's important to acknowledge that you have biases and that you work to identify them. In my case, I only recently reflected on an activity I used in a meeting as an icebreaker, which seemed innocuous enough. I found it on the web. I thought, this looks good, sounds safe, all good. Asking everyone what the weirdest thing was that they'd ever eaten. I really should have thought about that and how it would play out, because it became very clear very quickly that there were cultural connotations to weirdness that resulted in one person in particular essentially being excluded, not necessarily from the point of view of actually being excluded, but from feeling excluded as a result of the results of that activity. And I thought it was just a bit of fun, but it wasn't actually fun.
I'm really intrigued with
Nuts,
nuts. The trap
nuts.
So basically, the deal was there was one Chinese person in the team, and almost every other person in the team had their weird food being some kind of Chinese food.
Ouch.
Fair enough.
And I started off all good, and by the time 3 or 4 people had finished I was just like, oh my god, what have I done?
That's super not obvious.
You didn't.
Yeah, super.
You can't see that one coming, right?
I had no idea. Had absolutely no idea. Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, yeah.
Did you run it in Australia? Because the food here is really weird.
I did, and yet Vegemite was not one of the things that people said.
Interesting, right?
Normalized.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Vegemite's not weird unless you are from
Anywhere else. Anywhere else.
minus 25 million people
Yeah.
from not Australia.
I still think it's your duckins up there.
Sorry?
That's your duckin.
Yes, that's a monstrosity.
It's a turkey wrapped in a duck and a chicken.
The chicken was
Chicken and a duck and a chicken and a chicken. It's
That is totally real.
And they bake it, yes.
No.
Yeah.
That's American weird.
No.
I mean, to be fair, I think that
That's a secret.
I think that actually came from way back, because that's not the first time that people have stuck animals into other animals.
Yeah.
What?
That's incredible. A little more inclusive than the turkey wanted.
But yes,
Okay.
yes, I can see how no one will see that trap coming, and then you're just watching this train wreck.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
You're like,
What have I done?
what have I done?
Train wreck.
And I can't stop, and I can't look away.
No, that was pretty much what it was. And one other small example, it's only very recently that I've had Koori colleagues.
Yeah.
Never even thought about it before. The fact that I have worked for so many years in many organisations in Australia, and I have not had a Koori colleague until the last few years. So, wrapping up, please speak up. It's really, really important for those of us who are in positions where we can speak up, that we do speak up, because there are far too many people without a voice or who can't speak up. And if you're in an organisation where you know that there's someone who should be represented but they aren't there, it's up to you.
So I was a board member of the ACS for a number of years, and I was talking to a female ACS board member, and most board members are non-technical. And she was saying she couldn't understand why women would want to be engineers, and I had to explain to her that this is kind of a English-speaking thing, and I know plenty of non-English-speaking women who are engineers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of it's why it's everywhere, even with people you expect to know better.
Hey! We've been waiting for the presentation to start.
Oh, was that you? I called that on. I called you. I called everyone.
Oh, that was a cat.
Oh, that was the screeching cat.
It was me. I thought the
Mel's phone sounds like a cat when you call.
Sorry.
It's okay. I made it. Here we go.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Isabelle here is just starting the presentation.
I was going to say, you're here for almost the last slide.
Is it still slides? Perfect.
There is one slide.
I thought it's already the slides finished.
So we're here on the slide of what you can do, and if we all do all of that, then maybe we can achieve our goal of centering psychological safety, which is at the heart of inclusive practice. Supporting that in your organisation enables you to build trust that results in teams that can not only be diverse, but also take advantage of their diversity. And centering people at the heart of Agile, all people.
It's me.
Just it's raining man.
So, thank you.
Thanks, Isabelle. You know, it's been a while. They've been like, we really got to do this.
Yeah.
Reflections.
Yes.
What has changed since 2021?
A lot.
A few things.
Yeah. And also, like, I mean, I put some examples in there, but I'm really keen to hear what other people have thought about as things that you can do to be more inclusive.
I feel like the challenge is bigger. It keeps getting bigger a lot because of the politics. Right? Politics seems to be driving such a lot of bad behavior for the most part, and that we're accepting it now. I find it frightening.
Yep.
Communities don't feel like they're intermixing as much, right?
No, it's definitely
No,
I feel is right, you're wrong, and you're woke, or you're not woke, or asleep. I don't know. What's the opposite of being woke? But it feels like it's a harsher world, just like reading and social media, all of it. So it's more important than ever to realize how we're marginalizing.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important for marginalised groups to not fall into the trap of being anti-normal. So a lot of the sort of, the recent, violence against women and stuff, and it's like, it's men, they're the problem, all this sort of stuff, and it's like, that's not helpful.
Right.
Because it's not all men.
Well, it's sort of right back to what can you do to change, right? You got to start your own journey with positive, right? You can't just blame everybody.
Yes. And it's that whole sort of straw man sort of thing of, you're the anti, so you're bad. And it's throwing all that judgment on this thing that doesn't actually exist.
Yeah.
And it's not recognising the systemic nature of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, correct.
Yes. Yeah.
So yes, there are absolutely issues with violence against women.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's all men. It's kind of like, it's the marketing thing of, only 50% of marketing is effective. It's just we don't know which.
Yeah.
And yes, there are a small minority of men who are an issue. We just don't know which one.
And that's the problem, right? That's the problem.
More effectively, some that we do know, it's too late.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's
But there are now. It's about early signs and early interventions. See if we.
Yes, and it's awareness of those early signs. So things like not well, making women break connection with other relationships, making women break their financial independence. They are precursors to the violence. But if you don't know that they're the precursors, you don't know. But it's also, men being aware that women are basically hyper-vigilant the whole fucking time because you don't know. And understanding that that's maybe where they're coming from when your friendliness is rebuffed.
Survival instinct, right?
Absolutely.
Is this the 1 in 1,000? Is this the 1 in 1,000?
Don't know.
Is this the 1 in 1,000?
Yeah.
Well, because they don't have a great big sign on their forehead.
That's
that,
right.
I know. So each time, is this the 1 in 1,000?
Yep.
That
1 in 1,000 maybe, James.
I was being generous. I was being generous, but a 1 in 100, 1 in 10, 1 in 5, whatever it is. But yes, is it this time? Is it this time? Right? That's I mean that tunes that tunes the amygdala, right? That's why we've got a highly tuned thing. This is survival.
Yeah. So when I first came to Australia, coming from like London and pub culture, I was used to just talking to men in the pub. Yeah, they're just people.
well, you must like them.
Came here, as soon as you were friendly, you asked for it. Oh yeah.
I mean, in Russia, you just don't talk to the guys.
When I carried back to England, we were in a pub with, friends, all this stuff. Women were talking to him, and he was like, "Where's Bill? Where's Bill? Oh God, these women are talking to me because she's going to be really upset."
It's just like your extended lounge room.
But
Yeah, absolutely.
there is so many cultural difference. I think a really profound one, especially when it's when you marry someone from another country. Like I know a lot of Russian friends, obviously, because the culture is quite different in Russia, and we love the men paying for us, and it's normal, and we'll just keep paying for us. And
That sounds good.
I can't see anything wrong with that, it's kind of no worries. But when a lot of guys who kind of go and marry Russian girls, and maybe not Russian, but I just have examples with Russian. Girls find them really attractive because they're they want to get married straight away. They're really committed, But if you would be in Australia, you would think that he's desperate, why he wanna So the Australian girls would not date them because they find them too pushy and too much. Well, a lot of Russian girls he's to the point, we've been dating for 6 months, we want to get married, let's do it. And that's when a lot of those relationship happens, independent relationship, because that's a guys who then don't want you to work, want to stay you want to stay at home, don't want you to have money and things like that. But it's a different signs because in Russia it's a good sign. Oh, he's to the point where. And there's so many of those different examples, and it's multicultural as well as the gender could be involved. So you just never know. And that's why Russians always blame for this resting bitch face, because you just don't smile to the man, just because men approach you, so you don't even start the conversation. You're used to the guy will approach you. And then you come here and guys, where are you? I'm still in my resting bitch face and then there's so many of those differences as well.
It's just what the society's coded for. And it's a different.
But people don't like when you're sitting in the society, you don't see it as a cultural thing for you. Like you just think this is the way it is, right?
That's the very definition of a norm. Is that
That's
you
right.
you don't see it as different.
Yes.
But when we're talking about the organization, because I'm just come here, I'm talking here. I was so late. When I was working in the recruitment agency, that it's kind of like, everyone talking about diversity and inclusion, but you know that you just don't send Asians to this company, or you just don't send Indians to this company, or you just know. They even say like it's all, but it just, that hiring manager will choose the girl, and you just send them any girls just because they want a girl for
Which is
inclusion.
back to the point you were saying, right?
Yes.
Yeah, of the recruitership.
But you have to send
They want to land a
the
sale.
ones.
It's about
Yeah, the best.
It's the numbers.
They need to land a sale with as little effort as quickly as possible
Yeah.
because they've got to move on to the next
Doesn't mean
sale.
it's a
So
good
the numbers
fit.
up.
Yeah, and
But it fits the bill of what they're expecting to see.
Yes.
There's one company, the engineering manager was Brazilian. And what I did, I went to LinkedIn Recruiter and I put Brazilian university to my search and just spoke with anyone who came from Brazil just because it was the easiest target for me. And then I know that they probably will relate quicker and get more choice. But that's just reality. That's how it works.
You can't expect somebody who's in a sales position to be challenging. Like you're not going to challenge your client, right?
No.
Well, you can, and then you
You can't sell something that somebody that they don't want to buy, right? If they tell you what they want to buy, you get it for them, or they get it from someone else, right?
Like we think Russian
That's exactly
engineers
right.
the best. They give us some Russian, or like no, we never work with Russians. They're too direct. And
we were talking earlier about people recruit themselves.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm good. So I'll recruit another one of me.
Yeah, but it's evolutionary psychology. We always will be attracted more to people familiar to us. It's really hard, obviously, to go against it. But I don't know how to diversity and inclusion problem actually can be solved.
It takes real evolution on the part of
Many individual personality.
Yeah.
That change people.
People need to travel more.
I think we're all agreeing.
I find that there's a trade-off with the length of time you are at a company. So if you go from company to company, you don't have that longitudinal sort of experience, and you don't end up dealing with your own mistakes. But if you spend too much long time at the same company, there's an echo chamber.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a kind of like a trade-off there.
I'm not. Should I throw the AI hand grenade?
Go on then.
The AI hand grenade, yes. So what do you think?
I mean, I'm pointing to this because this is an AI generated picture.
Yeah, correct. So where do you think this DEI journey is going with the explosion in AI usage, and people are still learning what they can use it for?
Well, I think the thing with what I have seen from AI, and I haven't done any sort of research into this, but my understanding is that one of the issues with the use of AI is that it is more likely to reinforce biases than it is to challenge them, because it's learning off a body of work that has that inherent bias fully in it, and there's a lot more of that stuff than there is the stuff that is diverse and inclusive. And so it's just like you see it all the time. You ask for certain things from the AI and you get exactly what you would expect if you were asking that of, from what you were saying before, the what was it? The financially, the upper middle class, middle-aged white male.
American male.
American male.
Like, AI can't work out how many fingers we should have, but it knows that scientists are male.
Yeah.
This is we are correcting the algorithm, and I think AI may be a big opportunity for this to happen actually. Because the people who build stuff, we are all ignoring that. It's all ignored worldwide across all industries. But the model have been proven wrong, right? And there is an effort that is now put into making the mainstream AI model more inclusive, more diverse, and things. That's something we can correct. We can teach the model. So maybe we may end up with AIs that in the next decade will be less biased and will include all of that much more than people.
It's even more important to be intentional in that space and to already be thinking about it to start with. Yeah. And I'm not sure that the people who are pushing the big AI tools out there necessarily have this stuff in mind.
It's interesting, like Meta, Facebook is really open about what they're doing, right? Their model is publicly accessible. And they recognize some of the biases. So if you go download the model, you've got like the new version 3, whatever it is. And then there's like this giant safety module on the side too for like, do you want to be a bit smarter about, because the main models are trained on stats.
It allows you to, and that's old, but if you really would rather fix things, choose this. That's kind of weird.
But it's there because they're saying like, this is early days, right? And we're not sure if this is right. And people call out like the biases of like, the right wingers are calling out Google's like apparently way too safe, and then like Twitter comes out with like anti-woke AI, like oh no. So they're trying to like how do you get this, right? Yeah, exactly. Politically incorrect AI. Yeah. I think it's a complex.
I couldn't help it.
So I think some companies run into problems with hiring using AI. So not only do they bias.
CV? You mean CV filtering?
They bias against sort of people of African descent. The models will actually work out whether someone is African descent from their first name and what suburb they're in.
Yeah. But also, I have a very neurodiverse friend who has put his CV through ChatGPT, and whereas he has struggled previously, he has got a lot of hits using a ChatGPT modified version of his CV. So
because it will write it in standard.
That's right. A friend of mine who's COO for a startup, they were encouraging their employees to use AI before the performance review, and the one woman put hers in and said, write this as if you're a privileged white male. And she had the best one, right? Like,
there's some prompt engineering.
That's
I'm going to have to do that now. I'm really going to have to do that.
Whether it's good or bad is how you perceive it, and AI is just a tool. How you use it.
It's dependent on prompt. How?
Yeah.
And that's the prompt engineering is the key of AI.
Yeah.
Yes.
One of the reasons that I even brought this up is because there's people who are famous in our industry who have dropped any like agile advocacy things altogether and got switched straight to AI, right? So people who I respect, like Henrik Nieberg and a few others. So their world is entirely about grappling with this AI now. So
well, I think it's big enough that we have to, right?
yes. So I thought this is really. I mean, it was always going to be topical, but.
But on another side, before everyone used resume writers as well, and now the ChatGPT writing too. Like, I mean, the concept of resume is just disaster in general. Now it's just resume with AI, but the general, like, I think no one actually resolved recruitment problem like with no one who actually like recruiters don't like recruitment, candidates don't like recruitment, hiring managers don't like recruitment. No one likes recruitment.
Yes.
And no one saw and no one saw it. Like they're doing all these AI questions, and now they're having like the software that filter by task and ask the questions. And then probably for high volume jobs, it's kind of good because that give the people actually chance. The ones who have a really bad resume, it gives them chance at least to answer questions. So I mean, there's a pluses there.
But the generate repetitive thing, if you properly, if you are going to use it directly, like with generating something, if somebody is creating an AI-driven resume, you also did that, and sometimes after some time, it's like repetitive work. They actually.
Oh, there's so you can feed this through a.
Thinking.
You can feed this through a bot now, and it'll tell you how much of it is AI written into that. Yeah.
So, job ads.
Can you go back?
Yeah. Resumes are a fucked way of saying
That I'm amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, damn. I'm doing something wrong.
Applicant tracking systems are even more
Oh god, no, they are the most fucked of all.
That's even before you get to interview.
I don't know how many interviews that I've been to that instead of concentrating on the things that are actually used in the job, people ask questions straight from university textbooks. Like they're testing how good you did at university, which is not the same thing as how good you will do at work.
Right. So when I was, anyway, some public transport, I can't remember which one.
You get around.
Yeah. Their IT department was about as anti-agile as you could possibly get. But every job ad said must have agile.
Must be agile. Put up with our shit, not have agile. Yeah.
I don't know how many ads that I've seen that say must have 5 years experience.
This is something that's only been around for 3 years.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And is it 5 years experience or is it the same experience 5 years in a row?
That's the other one, right?
And
must have 10 years AI experience. I've been making shit up for years.
And learning in the ad.
So that QR code is the link to the report, but I mean it's available on the BAI website. Very easy to find.
Like, I don't know how many times I've seen C#.net.
Really good. Really good.
Thank you.
It's C#.
That's not what I wanted to do next. That's what I wanted to do next.
So we leave.
There's lots of stuff.
Holy hell.
I did say I was going to share some links.
If anybody wants the sort of like the details, more references, all that sort of stuff, you're going to send out to people who are checked in with the QR code.
I can do that.
I have a question, and I don't know if you might have it in the presentation that I missed. But recently, about the diversity and inclusion. Recently, I actually seen some article about that diversity is basically not as good if it's a really small company. So, for example, if it's like a startup, like 10 people startup, the diversity actually doesn't really make much difference for them because if they're actually similar, they're more likely to, work better together, have a same mission, go for the same, beer and pizza on Friday night.
You
and
can
have
do some of the presentations.
For a point in time.
Sense of communities, and that they actually can succeed better, like if they when we're talking about diversity and inclusion more on a big scale and we have a big organization department, but if it's like a 10 people company, there's no need for them to be diverse because they can be like more.
But they'll top out. You know what I mean? They'll only do what they can do. Like they won't get future thoughts. They'll reach their maximum and that will be all.
But if they just want to have a business for 10 years and sell it.
On that, I'm thinking a startup.
I don't know.
Sometimes you need focus. I'm just for the sake of the argument. Sometimes you need focus, and if you too diverse too many
Agree.
ideas,
It's not a bad idea at first, but it's your ideas growth.
It's
all
all
the
how you
last so long.
And it's very much the difference between effectiveness and efficiency.
Mm.
So you can be more efficient, with
But not
people who are
necessarily
the same.
effective.
But you can be more effective with people who are the best.
Yeah, let's shoot that one and eat it then.
Well, I think it's also like the concept of comfort. Yeah, it's more comfortable being in a team that's less diverse because you don't get challenged very much because everybody thinks like you, right? But comfort isn't necessarily a good thing.
Right.
Yeah, like psychological safety doesn't necessarily mean the same thing as comfort. You can feel psychologically safe, but still not necessarily, like still be able to have uncomfortable conversations.
In fact, in a very undiverse cohort, you can be very psychologically unsafe because as soon as you deviate from the norm, you're an outlier.
The immune system kicks in.
Yep.
Yeah, but okay, I'm just sort of, I don't know, I'm really talkative today. But for example, okay, so I'm a startup, you know, and we're all diverse. And because we're all diverse, when we want to celebrate, I don't know, like Christmas, not Christmas, but whatever, end of the year party, we all have to go and play lawn bowls because we need to find the inclusive activity that everyone can do. And everyone is sick of the lawn bowls.
Oh, man, I am Australian, it's not inclusive.
But I mean, like, if we all kind of, I don't know, on the same page and we all like surfing, we're going to go to a big surf and hire a big surf for the day and have an amazing Christmas party and the sense of, like, you know, sense of the team. But just because, you know, we have two people who kind of in swim, we can't do it.
But I mean, there's different areas of diversity. So you could have people who like the same activity, but think very different.
Yes. So you need to hire surfers, but from different countries. Yeah. Like I'm just sort of, you know, talking out loud.
Well, there is certainly many things you can do. That would be fun for everyone. There's so many things we can do on that, right? So we're finding it.
Axe throwing.
Axe throwing.
No, I just gave an extreme example, I guess, but yeah, just in general.
Axe throwing is kind of good.
Yeah.
Everybody loves it.
I've never been. Great. It's kind of cool.
Is it good? Did I play
Yeah, you throw
Are
axe
you
and it
gonna
just
get?
bounces.
No, not yet. I don't think there's axe throwing in my future.
Has anyone done the survival games?
Yeah.
And everyone
Survival
You have to
games.
be in the zone.
It's
Yeah,
an activity that shows how well you work together as a team. So you in a societal situation like you're on the moon or you're in a desert or whatever, and you have to pick the top 10 things in order you need to survive. And the idea is everyone does it as an individual, and then everyone does it as a team. The team score should be better than the individual score. And
It's
if
not
it
that
isn't,
happened for
maybe
No, in the group I was in, that did not happen.
Cheat alone.
Oh, no. The irony was that we had two people who were experts in survival in that group.
They convinced everyone.
So they left the rest out and they went and survived.
Oh no, they each picked different lists and no one could agree on anything.
Because they were experts.
Yes.
I had a company where it was splitting the teams, and the highest individual scores were in the lowest scoring teams because the expert opinion was drowned out by the loudest opinion.
Or the one that had the stick.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, that it's interesting that where a company goes in there and they get that feedback and they do something about it, or they get that feedback and they don't do anything about it.
We actually, when I worked at Tennis Australia, I ran a program for basically so that we could hire enough people to manage the Open. So we had essentially like a work experience program for uni students, and we would get them in the middle of the year, and then the ones that were really good we'd bring back for the Open. And the interview process for those people was very heavily crafted, and one of the exercises that we did was a problem-solving exercise, supposedly. But it actually was an exercise in assessing their ability to work in a team. And we'd basically stick a printer that wasn't working in a room and say, you need to go fix this, and there's 6 people in your group. Together you need to go fix this. And we'd have somebody sitting there watching them. And we would never hire the person who threw everyone out of the way to get to the printer because I know how to fix this thing, right? Because that's not what we were looking for. But those people think they absolutely know the answer to everything.
That's a really good test.
Yeah. I have another random question.
No more questions.
Really random. Okay. So, it just came into my mind. A bit of a, out of the comfort zone. But I've recently seen on Instagram, there's a few profiles, and I've seen guys, maybe, I don't know, fully looks like guy, maybe in their 50s, but they're wearing skirt and heels, yeah? Still wearing the suit and really manly.
Did you see our former foreign minister?
Looks really cool. I actually really like it. High heels, skirts, really fashionable. Working a corporate job. Yeah. Okay. So I have no problem with this. But if I'm hiring to my IT consultancy and I have the guy coming in, looking, completely normal, but then wearing this beautiful heels and a skirt, he's not identifying himself as a man. There is no any.
Just like that fashion.
He just likes fashion. He just loves wearing his heels and skirt. Yeah. So.
More power to him, I think.
And are very uncomfortable.
Yeah. I would be honestly, I don't know, I would feel I have nothing against it. I love your heels,
yeah, what size are they?
But what I would be thinking, how the whole team would think about it. And then on another side, he's wearing heels just because he likes it, not because, he, changing gender or anything like that. But we all kind of pretend to be someone else at work. So can we ask, where is this diversity and inclusion? Should we ask him to put the jeans on or not? But then someone rock up to work but if I rock up to work in a bikini because I love bikinis and I just want to work in a bikini, why someone would tell me to not to wear a bikini? It's just me, I just,
Ooh, where's the best?
That's a there's a lot to go on.
I'm not qualified to respond.
We got sick leave and we don't want that. That's the only excuse I can find.
I mean, bikini may be the extreme, but I don't know, just maybe I'm wearing crop tops and I want to come to work in the crop tops. Yeah, so I just love crop tops. I don't have abs. I want to show around my abs. Want to come to work in the crop tops every day.
So I'm inclined to think that
why you can wear heels and I can't wear crop tops?
After COVID, I think.
Because you can wear heels too.
Yeah. But after COVID.
Well, but he could wear a crop top.
Dress code is much more.
Oh, much more.
Totally.
I haven't worn a single thing in my pre-COVID wardrobe that was business wear since COVID. That stuff is headed to Vinnie's or something next time I do a clear out because I don't see myself ever wearing it again.
But in reality, let's be real. How many people will see the red flag if the guy rock up to heels?
So I think there is a conversation to have here about the ethic of work clothes. As Kristen just said here, it's you're not even expecting wearing a suit and shirt. I started my career for 5 years. I had to wear a tie every day. I was working French State Bank. You don't wear a tie. It's Are you okay? Are you hangover? Did you miss something? Oh, now you have to. Oh, you always had a spare tie in the drawer because also the kind of tie you were wearing and the colours and stuff, professional or not, what it was. So that's one work ethic clothes wear. So I've seen startups you actually can work in bikini. Right? And that's not just relaxed for like dresses. Right? And it's really about like the kind of it's cultural. Like, what do you
It's what the company you work in too. Like I remember 100 years ago when I was young, I got my nose pierced, and I had people say that is career limiting. Get rid of it. It was because I was an early adopter, right? And it was like, oh, you're not going to progress.
No, but do you
So
think?
as a young person, I was given careers advice to say, don't dress for the job you have, dress for the job you want. And I was like, I want a job where I can wear jeans and get paid for my brain.
But the thing was pajamas. But I think the problem is, and the guy who have in the heels, we also like, oh, we don't want to offend him, like, oh, maybe like, you know, it's the reason he wearing heels, you know what I mean? So I think it goes like deeper than just like fashion, and because there's so many talking about this inclusivity, you know, LGBT, ABCD, a bit like OF. And you know what I mean? And no, I'm just sorry, I'm just being real today.
This is going.
I'd like to.
And then it's like, oh, but we don't want to offend him because he runs up his heels, maybe you know, have childhood trauma and things like that. And, you know, where is that balance?
There is so much
Where is the balance?
There is so much assumption here. Like, have you had a conversation with him? Have you had a conversation with the team? Is anybody actually
Does anybody care?
You know, your freedom stops when people are uncomfortable, and then is that person is it okay for her to be uncomfortable? Is it not okay? Like, come on, mate, like it's your problem. We should fire you because you should be comfortable with this. It's not going to happen. You have like all kind of things.
There's a certain point at which you go, is the way I show up going to distract from the content of what we want to deal with, right? Does it help because it makes me more comfortable to do it, or does it now make someone else uncomfortable and now they struggle to focus on the content at hand and actually deal with that? So it's going, what's best for both?
Yeah. I have an example which is not about gender or whatever. It's a guy I've been working with, and he loved Japan culture. So he would walk into work dressed like an anime. And it's like, all right, so first day you're like, wow, are you like a candy distributor? Like, you look at like all colors and when you have pockets with actual candies in there. I was like, well, that's, oh, you know, it's from this. All right. Nobody had any problem with that. Right? He had different fashions and things. I think most people were like, yeah, that's just how we've been working with him for a few years. That's all okay. But we're at client side. The client was like, oh, he's been productive, so I have no problem. But when I worked up with a t-shirt, which was a dead girl with her head blasted up and brains everywhere, and I was like, mate, I'm sorry, like, put your jacket on.
Why?
Go home. Because that's really like, well, you're
we talked about that 1,000 earlier.
It's potentially triggering to people apart from anything else.
Yes, that makes it difficult for the other people in the client to focus on what they need to focus on. Now you are distracting more than you are adding.
And that's a non-safe place. As a female, and I see you're wearing something where I might be dead on your shirt, I'm a little less likely to be enjoying it.
So was it fine? But when he started turning up with the fully super sharpened samurai sword, was that when
everybody was comfortable, so we did barbecue skills and stuff.
No worries.
But I think you kind of feel when it in the district and not. Your situation is different because we are in the middle of like gender freedom and like going beyond the biases. I'm like, in this situation, would you tolerate a woman wearing the heels, a woman wearing the dress? And if so, in this day and age, one other man. Why is that disrupting? Right? But similarly, like everybody is like, oh, you know, we come to be like thinking of it and influence the work, have a conversation with it. Do you have all the things you want to wear? including dressing yourself like a candy distributor. Maybe that doesn't disrupt the team as much. We're okay with that. Maybe this one, for some reason, but there is a conversation to have there. Most importantly.
I think COVID was a watershed. So there was just an acknowledgement that people had lives.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you're day in, day out on Zoom,
Yeah.
you can't be professional 100% of the time. You can't wear suits. Well, there's
Can't
a
be washing
there's
hair.
a cat in the background. Wife or husband cooking dinner and
Three grandchildren and pets.
Love working hard. And COVID was just the most amazing time.
Keyboard cat.
Yes, this is a keyboard cat. She regularly comes and interrupts meetings because she's decided it's time for attention.
Yeah.
And,
And the butler should not be working.
Doesn't take. That's right. And doesn't take no for an answer. So if you just gently push her away, she'll come back. And she'll deliberately go and sit on the keyboard so that the keys are, here we go, right? Or climb directly onto you. So put her body between your face and the screen so that.
Yeah, you're supposed to be paying attention to me, not those people.
This is what I think of you.
This is you're not. Come on, you're not doing your job. Come on. Yeah, exactly.
Butler, I'm hungry.
Also,
Yeah, reminding me that my boss is actually quite exclusionary because she only allows cat people. Like it's an interview question. Are you a cat person or a dog person?
Wow.
Ooh.
That's a weird one.
She's a cat person.
But
If you're a dog person,
Wow.
So welcome.
I mean, it's not like, she is totally, like, ethically sound. She doesn't actually make the hiring decisions on that basis, but she's very much like, are you a cat person? Because you need to be a cat person if you want to work in this team.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's.
Also, with COVID, it became totally acceptable to say, I can't make this meeting, I have to pick my children up from school. Can you imagine doing that before COVID?
Oh yeah, it wasn't accommodated anywhere near as much. So, even though it was always illegal to discriminate on the basis of family responsibilities, right? So that was always in the law, and
People often.
But it didn't get really hit home until people had to homeschool kids during COVID.
Yeah.
Also, there's a lot more pressure on schools when parents actually saw what the children were being taught.
Well, I think people were like, oh God, what am I going to do with these kids? Like, go, please. I mean, I believe that generation is going to be great bartenders because I'm pretty sure they probably just learned to make their parents drink.
So, yeah, I think the downfall of whole word reading is from COVID. I mean, the science was always there, the phonics was the way, but
I'm just going to.
saw what was happening with whole word reading.
Well, this is the area of the Department of Education that I work in, so.
Oh, right.
As somebody who went through her work reading, had a tendency towards dyslexia, whole word reading worked for me. My mother taught me how to read reading. I then went to school and they taught me phonics, and I loved the ability to read.
There's never going to be a single approach that works for everyone.
One that's really corrosive.
I found my guide to
where
diversity.
they get you the word from the context.
Oh god. This was my Venn diagram to Middle East diversity.
Okay, it was like really
Oh, I like that. Can I have that, please?
Yeah.
So
Isabelle,
Do you want me to-
a question for you. Wonderful presentation, by the way.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you said there was a website or something to give feedback, like productive feedback. Could you give me that option?
Oh, Textio.
Textio.
So, is it on
And
here?
how do I send this to you?
My children.
You could connect with me on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So that's
And
one
there's
of
So-
so many clicks.
one of the reasons that I always wanted to do better. Yeah. Because
Thank
you're
you so
not
much.
like that.
I missed your last name, I'm sorry.
Kluger, Kluger.
Yes, yeah, which I would love to hop in here, but.